Hey everybody, how's it going? It's Rob. It's Rob, and tonight we have here on Turbo Time, we have Shmup Junkie, who some of you may know from his channel. Junkie,
Hey, Rob.
how's it
Looking
going?
forward to it. Glad to be here.
Excellent. Want to tell us a little bit about yourself, your channel, for those in the audience that aren't familiar with it?
Okay. I'm not really good at it for whatever it's worth, but I have a YouTube channel called Shmup Junkie. It's generally specializes in shmups, shooters, whatever you want to call them. Been doing it for a couple years. Started the channel basically just to make some PC Engine Mini review videos, and it just did really well and took off from there. And since then, I've been having a really good time enjoying it. Channel's grown really well, expanded, and that's about it. I'm just having a really good time making videos about shooters and helping the genre grow.
Yep. And you put out some great videos too.
Thank you.
So, all right, and before we move on, just want to say hello to everybody in the chat. I see experts here, Fatal Vision, and Retro Tiburon. How you doing, guys? All right. Unfortunately, Kyle has not joined us yet, so here's hoping he will pop in before too long. So we are going to go right to Mike.
Hello, I'm Mike, aka Satanga. I haven't really been doing a heck of a lot productive lately, but I am every now and again attempting to write. I don't even know what genre you call it. I'm just going to call it a rant novel. I don't know how better to put it, but I'm tentatively titling it the whole package, and it delves into video games every now and again, but I can't really call it strictly a game project. Still, if there is something I'm working on, that's the closest thing to a productive thing that I am doing. So maybe it'll get finished, maybe not. I have no idea. We'll see. But other than that, I have also streamed on Twitch before, off and on. Currently, it's off ever since I had a crappy hospital stay last year. I haven't had the strength or focus to get back into streaming. So this is a depressing explanation of things, but I still like video games. I think I'm still up for hosting on this roundtable. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Oh, that's good. Expert makes a pretty good point here. How's the volume? Can everybody hear all of us okay? Like, let's there's Mike.
How's that?
How about you, Junkie? Said that your voice is a bit louder.
I can hear you just fine. Yeah, no, you sound good.
Yeah, now it may also be my mic too. It's not the greatest in the world. But I've also adjusted the volume a little bit, so that may help level things out. So we'll finish this up and then we'll get started. Okay. Yeah. I got mine boosted to max volume, so I don't think that's going to change.
I can whisper to compensate.
Or I could just turn you down.
Okay, that's it. That's what the world does, so I'm used to it.
Anyone here know how to do a good impersonation of Cartman for when Kyle jumps on? No?
I've done an okay impression before, but that's about it.
I could, but I don't feel confident today. Actually, I think I just need a line to say in his voice, because I can't really think of one that wouldn't be really offensive. Then, like, I don't want to go there.
Oh, no, not like that. Just the usual line. I just don't know him well enough where I'd be like, damn it, Kyle. I can't do Cartman, so.
Respect my authority.
Ski guys and Gillingham. But Cartman.
That's pretty good.
Guys. Thank you.
I'd say it's pretty good.
Yeah.
Much obliged.
All right. Anyway. So, why don't we just go ahead and kick things off here? So I figure how we're going to do it is we can start with Junkie, move around to basically counterclockwise until we get back to me.
Yep. However you guys want to do it. I'm sure it'll be like a group conversation back and forth
Yeah.
as we reminisce about such things.
Oh, yes. So, given that, what was the first time that you played the Turbo in any form? You know, a PC Engine emulation, whatever.
Oh, well, first time I played the Turbo is probably, I don't know if it was day one because I don't remember that far back, but it was right when it came out because I was already anticipating it. I couldn't wait for it. My grandparents knew I wanted it. So when it came out, they were nice enough to get one for me. So I was one of the very first, early adopters of the console. Probably with not the first day, the first week I had it, playing Keith Courage and anything else I can get my hands on. There weren't that many games at the time. But luckily I lived in like Hollywood, Los Angeles. So that was one of the test markets for, the initial launch. So unlike most of the country, which didn't even get it or couldn't get games, which is part of why it sold so poorly, we had plenty of access to it. It was everywhere. So yeah, I mean, I was on it practically from day one when it came out.
Nice. Let's see. How about you, Mike?
I did indeed experience the PC engine, or I should ask, are we going to be? Should we try to be consistent with one name for the system or the other?
I don't know if it matters. I think when I call it the Turbo Graphics when I refer to US games, or like in my case, I call it the Turbo because that's what I bought. But if I'm talking about PC Engine games and I call it PC Engine, I kind of go back and forth.
That's fair. That's fair. Yeah, because I first experienced the PC Engine, thinking of calling it that because of the emulator I used, really early emulator from back in the day called the Magic Engine that my brother had somehow installed on here, and I didn't even know what a TurboGrafx was back then. I just assumed that like this was something that played some type of PC games, like literally a PC engine, which not even knowing what the heck the PC 8801 family of computers was. But yeah, somehow I had an unchecked version of that emulator because I know that like down the line or some point Magic Engine was somewhat infamous for timing your plays, and you had to like buy a full version or whatever, which it's not really something that you see in emulators nowadays attempting to profit from it. I don't think Magic Engine is the ideal emulator to use for such games anymore, but it was my introduction to the whole deal, and there were 3 games in particular that I found myself being drawn to repeatedly, but I'm not sure if I should reveal those yet or if I should just leak that out as we move on.
Well, your call. Go ahead and do what you will.
Move on for now. We can probably find an opportunity to discuss those.
All right.
Yeah, I can't remember exactly what all the launch games were off the top of my head. I just know like Keith Courage, obviously, and then Legendary Axe was one of the first games that, came out right out of the gate. And obviously that was one of the best ones. So we're all over that game as soon as it hit the store shelves.
I see we've got Omega Ace Gaming in chat. So welcome aboard. And also, that was one hell of a fun stream you had last night. Omega recently did a contest stream where it was all about Disney games. So, but you can always check out his channel and look that up. Regarding me and the Turbo, because that's literally all it was. I had no clue what the PC Engine was. It was the TurboGrafx 16, and a friend of my family's had come down to visit us shortly after he moved to Florida. And earlier, he'd brought his Genesis with him that he'd gotten like basically the day it came out. And when he made the trip back down the next year, had the same carrying case, but this time he had a TurboGrafx. And I distinctly remember what every game was he had with it. Let's see. Obviously, Keith Courage. He had Victory Run. And he also had Bonk's Adventure. And he had Ninja Spirit. And, well, Ninja Spirit's awesome, so and I like the other ones, Victory Run the least, but, Ninja Spirit, I was like, okay, this is really cool.
It's still cool. Yeah, that game is awesome. Still love playing it.
Oh, yeah. So, he ended up buying another game while he was visiting us, but I'll get to that one later. All right, so, Junkie, tell me this then. What would be your least favorite PC Engine game?
Well, I guess you probably already know the answer to this one. Most people know the answer to it. And it's not for what, most people might think. I mean, yeah, it's a bad game, but I think it was because I was there when it first came out, and I remember seeing pictures of it in magazines, and I was actually looking forward to it because it looked pretty cool in screenshots. Like, I liked the idea of like this underwater, shooting game, and it wasn't Darius, obviously. It just looked interesting. Like, I was like, I'm looking forward to it. And back then, you don't really get to own a lot of games, and early on, there weren't really rentals yet. So when it did come out, the idea that I went and purchased it, or my parents purchased it for me, and that game was Deep Blue, and obviously it's it was so bad that it's just disappointing because that's going to be the game that I'm stuck with for the next couple months or more, whenever we can afford another one. So it was just that disappointment of like, wow, this game is really bad. It sucks. I can't believe I got this. Disappointment of it that solidifies it for me more so than just, oh, well, there's lots of games that are shitty. It was that I kind of got screwed on it. So that didn't help.
I know that feeling.
And really, I mean, it's, I don't think it's that terrible graphically, and I don't think it's that terrible, orally either. It's just, if it just feels like it was thrown together, you could just hide in corners of the screen. Like it's practically borderline unplayable. If you try to play it legitimately, you can't. The only way to really get through it well is to cheat it. And it's like the developers didn't really think or put any time into like the enemy waves. It's almost like they just kind of lazily just threw it all together, didn't test it, didn't play it, said, the hell with it. Almost, it's very homebrewish in the actual mechanics of the gameplay. Like, it's just bad.
Yeah, it just seems so random at times.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the point. It's kind of like, yeah, we're just going to throw all these enemies at you, tons of them. You don't have the firepower to do anything about it. There's no good or legit way to really play that game. The only way to really play it is to cheat it. And then when you do decide to cheat it, you're just circumventing everything. You can just circumvent like huge parts of it, and you're not really playing. You're just kind of hanging out, staying out of the way of enemy swarms and finishing it. I think it was Wanman has a really good replay of it. I watched a while back. That's pretty much it. Like, it's just wasn't something I wanted to keep playing, and I was stuck with it.
Also see that Snarb is here in the stream, and also welcome Weeb Nerd Gaming.
Oh, Weeb Nerd, my buddy. He's from my Discord. How you doing?
Oh, cool.
Hey there.
Yeah, he's he has his own channel too. He does a lot of 1cc. He's a very, very talented shmup player, or in general.
Excellent. And I've worked with,
and he's from Japan. He actually helped us. I met him because he helped me do the translation for Nexer. When I did that Nexer video, he's the one that helped me get all of the cutscenes translated so I could post them all in English for that video that I did. That's how we like originally started, like met and started chatting.
Very cool.
Well, thanks for that, because that was definitely handy. And of course, both Mike and I have worked with Snarp before.
Hey, duder.
So,
How do?
So, Mike, what about you? What's your least favorite PC Engine game?
Uh, my answer is probably a little bit boring and expected, and I don't 100% burningly hate this game like I do some other games here and there, but really the best I can think of for this subject now is a pretty infamous one in TG16 circles, and that is, of course, China Warrior, which was Hudson's attempted take on the kung fu formula. Except oddly enough, it was also an auto scroller somehow. The logic behind that, I don't know why. Although you could stop scrolling if you crouch, but yeah, the movement was weird, and it I kind of like it when actually it is the side-scrolling stages where you have to punch these creepy-looking monks and all these obstacles like rocks, spears, bats, and whatever. It is kind of clunky, kind of jank. Your sprite is maybe too large, but I think the game kind of has a decent concept and potential, if nothing else. And then that all goes right down the toilet whenever a boss fight happens, because these have some of the worst hit detection I've ever felt in any game, like let alone a fighting game, if that's supposed to throws potatoes at you. As someone like I don't know who programmed the hit detection or like why it is so hard to land a straight hit on a boss. They're either blocking you a lot or everything just misses you or whatever. Like the first boss, this kind of dumpy looking military guy with a mustache, he's not so bad, but then you fight what looks a bit like Chun-Li in the second stage. She is beatable, but she's definitely worse to take on. And then a guy who looks a lot like Jackie Chan is your boss for stage 3. I figure out how to beat that son of a bitch consistently, if at all. I blatantly cheated to see the end of the game because there are only 4 levels, but at level 3, it's just over for me. So if anyone knows how to beat Jackie Chan, write in real life or in China Warrior. I'd be interested to know. So.
Yeah, I remember seeing all the game magazines at the time, basically comparing that and Last Battle for the Genesis, and just like completely losing their minds over the sprite detail in both games and whatnot.
That's one of those. It's another one of those games, right, where like it looks great in screenshots, so you're excited because you have these huge sprites, coming from the NES. We never had anything like that, so you're like, oh, this is gonna be awesome, and then you fire it up, and it's just absolute garbage. Like the gameplay just sucks, and it's so disappointing. Like one of those games. Which there was much better brawlers. Like Vigilante was one of the launch titles, and that one's underrated. I think the game is actually pretty cool and pretty fun. I liked Vigilante. That's a good game. China Warrior was not.
Yeah, Vigilante is better than China Warrior, but I'm still not great at that one. For some reason, unless I'm doing something wrong, it seems like it takes ages to kill bosses in that game. So
that's an IRM game, so it's a hard game.
Point. Yeah, you're right.
Also, just want to say welcome L to the stream, and I see BL85 Gamer has finally appeared. He usually shows up. And also, just another side note.
What's up, Bruno?
If you ever want to check out some really good streams of like Castlevania games and hacks and whatnot, check out Fatal Vision's channel. Good stuff. Okay, now for my least favorite TurboGrafx-16 game. It's actually a PC Engine game. I wish I could remember the name of it off the top of my head. But it plays kind of like Space Harrier, except you're a samurai.
Wait. I know the one. Dr. Sparkle covered it in one of his Cron Turbo episodes. If I can look up the name while you're talking about it.
Yeah, go ahead. It's just I bought it because it's like, it's Space Harrier. I'm a sucker for Space Harrier clones. And it's like you don't really have any kind of a long range weapon. There's you slash these oncoming enemies with your sword, and it's not Galaga 90. It just, I don't know, it was disappointing in the end. Luckily, it only cost me a couple of bucks. But yeah, I just wasn't impressed. And like I said, if even the name is escaping me, you can tell it's definitely not a favorite of mine.
Hang on, hang on. I have the visual in front of me. I just need to. Apparently, the game you are talking about is called Jinbu Densho.
That's it.
Oh yeah.
And apparently, Wolf Team was involved in its development, which is surprising because they usually turn out some pretty good stuff. So
Yeah, exactly.
Well,
Blazing. Come
the game's
on,
interesting because
television,
it's not
blazing lasers.
that bad. It's like it's got a cool sound, like it's got like, some cool music on the opening stage, and like it's got potential, but it's just I don't doesn't seem like they were ready to pull it off just yet.
Yeah, that's probably the biggest issue I have with it. It's just, it's not. It had potential. It had potential. But yeah, I'm keeping the copy I've got. Just because. So anyway. Alright, let's turn this around then and go to your favorite PC Engine game. Juggy,
Who's first?
you.
Me? All right. All right. Well, this one's tough because there's so many great games, obviously, and it kind of always waffles between two different games, because there's a difference between a favorite and most nostalgic. Because I think if I had to pick my most nostalgic TG16 game, it would be TG16 because that's obviously what I owned at the time. It would be Blazing Lasers, because it was so. I mean, I think everybody knows why it was such a big deal at the time.
Oh yeah.
Playing it later on down the line, after other games come out, maybe, it's like, okay, well, this was cool, but there's other cool games. But it came out pretty early in the life cycle, and you're coming from the NES, and there was no Super Nintendo, and there was really nothing out for the Genesis either, besides maybe Thunder Force 2, which was good. And it was just, wow, it was just so mind blowing to play. It's the game that got me into playing more shooters. And looking back at it now, yeah, it's not perfect and it's, overly long, at the start and overly easy. And, but I still love playing it because of the nostalgia of it, and how cool it was. But if I had to pick like my current favorite game, the one that I play the most, it would be similar, but it would be Soldier Blade. For the same reasons, just because it's that, but amplified, many times over, and it's not that it's perfect. It's just when I look at my entire library and which games I come back to the most, it's Soldier Blade because, the controls are perfect. The music is some of the best chip tunes of the generation. It's like you always want to go back and play it because it's just, the music is so good and it's so fun to play. It's just, I never get tired of it. And then you've got the 2-minute caravan modes that's like super fun to, come back to and try to beat your score. So, I think of all the games on the system, I play that one the most.
And that is an excellent choice.
Very.
Yeah. All right, Soldier Blade, that was, I had to make that my priority acquisition. And I'm glad I did because it's such a great game.
And an expensive game.
Yeah, luckily I was able to get a pretty good deal on it when I got it. So, I mean, I had to forfeit stuff like the case and the manual and all that, but I owned the game. So.
Oh, there's Bruno saying it's true. BL85 gamer. He's part of the 600,000 club on Soldier Blade. He's cracked 600,000 points in the 2-minute mode.
Nice. I got to go ahead and do that at some point. We'll see if that ever happens, though. So how about you, Mike?
Well, really, really tricky one, and this is very heavily rooted in nostalgia, but one of the 3 games that I played the most back on the Magic Engine is my favorite. problem is I don't know which one to pick. Well, one of them, you already probably know what it is, Rob, and spoilers, I'm looking at him, so I'll leave that one to you.
Thank you.
But between the other two, and I genuinely don't know, it's a very, very tough split for me between Bloody Wolf and Airzonk.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the other two that I grew up on most prominently. Airzonk was colorful, zany, quite varied, and was kind of my introduction to the wide world of shooters on the TG and the PCE. And I genuinely like it even more than the mainline Bonk games. So, not that Bonk's Adventure ain't great, so. But Bloody Wolf was just a really neato action game that I happened upon that had an amazing freaking soundtrack, a very interesting and cool gameplay that teetered the line between Contra and Metal Gear. Well, actually, I guess it would be more germane to compare it to overhead run and guns like Mercs and Outzone and what have you, but it was a little bit more, slightly more methodically paced than those games, and it just had some really neat boss fights, just this cool overall atmosphere to it, and a legitimately interesting mid-game twist, which it's a great action game that really sort of encapsulates everything that I thought the TG16 represented back then. Also, I only found out after the fact that it was actually an enhanced port of a Data East arcade game called Battle Rangers, but the arcade game is much sloppier. I'm way too used to the TG16. You know, I probably would say Bloody Wolf if I was given the choice between the two. Not that Airzonk isn't awesome in its own way, but I haven't played Airzonk 2 recently, but I did play Bloody Wolf somewhat more recently, and I still have as much of a blast as that one as I ever have. So, yeah, good.
Yeah, I
It's like,
just want to say something real quick. I remember seeing both Bloody Wolf and Soldier Blade, either for sale or rent back in the day, and I am super pissed that I never played either of them back then.
Yep.
So, but you were about to say, Junkie?
oh yeah, I was just saying, especially if you played it back then when it came out, it was kind of like and it still is. It's a guilty pleasure game. It's what it is. Like there's just, it's not overly difficult. It's fun. The music is cool. Like like I said, it's got that silly plot, and like it just, when you're 12 years old, like it's like the perfect game. So it's, when you play, I mean, even you played it a lot, later down the line and you enjoyed it. So imagine, us kind of like 12-year-olds, it's memorable in that way.
Yeah, Fail makes a good point. It is pretty close to Rambo, at least on the basis that like Rambo is always misinterpreted as a one-man super commando when really in the movies he did a lot of stealthing and planning. He really was more the prototype to Solid Snake as opposed to I don't know, Marcus Phoenix. And I never thought I'd make a Gears of War reference in one of these damn things, but here we are. Ugh, Jesus Christ.
Well, rather than go off on that tangent, Mike.
Yeah, please don't. Please rewrite the ship, as it were.
Okay, so to get to mine, yeah, I'm sure everyone's guessed it already, but this was for the TurboGrafx 16, and I can literally say this game changed my life. I mean, it's usually like, hyperbole or whatnot, but in this case, it's actually true. Turns out the game that my friend had bought when he was down visiting us that year was Splatterhouse. And I remember walking into my room when he was playing it, and I'm just like, what the heck is this? And he tosses me the box, and it's like, is that Jason Voorhees getting ready to beat the crap out of some chainsaw-handed guy? I'm intrigued. And he gets up to Biggie Man at stage 3, and that's the minute I was sold on it. I was like, okay, this is officially one of the coolest games I've ever seen. In fact, when I bought my own Turbo for the first time, that was the first game I bought for it. And you know, yeah, that's why the Rick that's representing me is wearing the red mask, because that was where it all started for me. That started my Splatterhouse fandom, which eventually moved into the sequels and then the Famicom game, and eventually led to the creation of West Mansion, and then getting contacted by Namco to work on the 2010 game. And yeah, that was. I'm the Splatterhouse guy. I'll always be the Splatterhouse guy. So yeah, it kind of literally changed my life.
Yeah, if I may be allowed to steal the baton for a bit.
Go ahead.
Yeah, alongside Bloody Wolf and Arizong, Splatterhouse was indeed the third game that I grew up on, so to speak. Maybe I shouldn't have been playing it for as young as I was, but then again, I did first play Wolfenstein 3D and Doom when I was even younger, so... and yet, despite being used to how those games worked, even compared to Doom, when I played Splatterhouse, I was just struck at how immensely creepy and gruesome the game was. Like, I'm not even sure if my incipient little mind could comprehend all the bizarre, writhing corpses and whatever crazy shit's in the game, but all I knew was I was morbidly fascinated by it. Just everything about the game's design just fascinated me and made me want to keep playing for as far as I could go. Like, even if the quote-unquote gameplay is relatively simple, it's also very easy to understand and just very fast-paced. It moves along at a great clip for the most part.
You said you played that at age 11, right?
10, 11, somewhere around there, yeah, I believe. So yeah, like I said, maybe not the most appropriate game for little Mikey, but I came across it, and I actually did unintentionally play on the foreign version of that one, so I had the Jason Voorhees ripoff version of Rick and the Terror Mask to work with, but X is probably right. There are probably worse games to play at age 11, like Deep Blue or China Warrior. Splatterhouse is actually a quality game, even if it's not an appropriate one, and I don't want to go into the whole Joseph Lieberman tangent or whatever. But all I can say is that I just really was a huge fan of the game, and I was shocked to learn that it also had 2 sequels released on the Genesis somewhere down the line. And I played it for as far as I could get, but the 5th boss, whom I won't spoil if anyone hasn't played the game, was extremely difficult, and I could never beat them back then. So I assumed that was actually the final boss, not knowing that there were 2 more stages after that. I was like, wow, this game just is full of surprises. The game keeps on giving. And it was my appreciation of Splatterhouse that actually somehow led me to West Mansion, and I somehow became Rob's friend after spamming his guest book.
This is true. Back when guest books were a thing.
Yeah, that too. Wow, Jesus Christ. Was that even still Web 1.0? I don't know.
Somewhere between 1.0 and 2.0. But,
right.
I just want to say, though, I got you beat on that. I sent my nephew for his 8th birthday the Namco Arcade Party Pack, which has the arcade game on there.
Wow.
And full approval of his mother, by the way. And so, yeah, he's gotten to experience the completely uncensored version.
Right.
At his age.
Yeah, the arcade version is even violenter. This is true.
Admittedly, he hasn't said much about it, though. He's very much hooked on Pokemon and Mario right now.
Yeah, well, at that age, it probably is more appropriate, and I can't really argue.
Yeah.
So,
I admit that it was in the top 3 of my rotation on my Turbo Express. I played the heck out of it all the time, and because everyone was making a big deal out of it at the time because of how gory it was in the magazines, because that just wasn't a thing. So, it was it was popular because it was the talk of the town. So obviously I had to have it.
Yeah.
And I said it's very much like Ninja Spirit in its in its arcade type gameplay. Not as far as how the game plays, but it's a perfect game to just pick up and play for 20 minutes. It's short. It's not overly difficult. Once you memorize it, you can just grab it and have fun with it and play it for 20 minutes, run through it, and like have a thoroughly good time. And then you could do it again a week later, and then you could do it again a week later. And that's kind of how it was. So both just very great, like short arcade experiences that are dense and fun. And once you master it, it's just always fun to kind of come back to. I always enjoyed it.
And
Definitely.
as an aside, I'd like to acknowledge two PC Engine CD games which stand out to me, not only because they're great, but because of how much trouble I went through to get them before the internet. And
Well, I can guess one off the top of my head.
oh, go right ahead. Guess one of them.
Well, I would say the obvious one is Akumajo Dracula X Shino Rondo.
And you
if
would
I
be
had to
correct.
guess. All right.
The other one is Gradius 2.
Oh yeah. Both
That one
Konami.
I could have guessed.
Yeah. But I had to go through a lot to get both of those in the pre-internet days.
I think anybody can say Rondo of Blood. That's kind of like one of those games. It's like there's a favorite game and there's a best game, and it's like, okay, what was the best game on the PC Engine CD? Oh, it's Rondo of Blood. That's the game that everyone was jealous of.
Yeah.
That's what I remember is that obviously I literally bought it day and date. I was waiting there to get it the moment it showed up, and everybody wanted to play it, and they were pissed because they could only play it in my house because who else had a freaking Duo? They could play that game. Like,
Yeah, and I remember back in the day when Rondo was such an exalted holy grail because for a very long time it didn't make it outside of Japan, which freaking sucked. It was objectively one of the best Castlevania games, nay, one of the greatest action games of all time, and we didn't get it until officially in some official capacity until sometime late 2000s, early 2010s when it was actually released on at least one form of digital distribution. At this point, I don't even remember. Oh yeah, and of course it came to the PSP via the Dracula X Chronicles.
Yep.
Better late than never, as it were. But damn it, we really should have had it in some form before that. By cracky.
Yeah, the fun
my
part
opinion.
about that was for me though,
What's that?
I actually got that the same week that Castlevania Dracula X came out for the Super NES, so I was able to compare the two of them.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah. Now, Gradius 2, on the other hand, I remember seeing all these magazines, saying it was coming out for the Turbo. It's like, it's going to make it to America. I'm thinking, oh, thank you, a new Gradius game. And then it just never arrived. Like, the Famicom version never arrived.
Yeah. We didn't get that one until many years later, at least at first of the PSP on the Gradius collection. And actually probably got in some form before that, but again, that's not to toot your own pipe, but Konami's odd refusal to release awesome games in the West was a major reason why you started your other website, the OPCFG, correct?
This is true.
Mm-hmm.
So,
not to aggrandize you too much, but I thought it would be interesting to bring that fact up. So
yeah.
I do have
Luckily for me, luckily I had a import store that was within distance from me that rented them and didn't just sell them. So I was super lucky that I could just go and rent, and that's what I would do, is rent, Gradius 2, rent Image Fight 2, rent, every game that I didn't or couldn't want to buy, for the weekend. And that was pretty rare. It's hard to find TurboGrafx games, let alone PC Engine games, CD games, let alone imports. Yeah. So it was very lucky. And that's pretty much how I ended up playing most of all my games at the time because I couldn't afford to buy them all. So you're just constantly renting them every weekend. It was a new game.
There was a store about 45 minutes away from me that rented out import games too, except all they really had was Super Famicom. So
this place was called Japan Video Games.
I think mine was
real creative, right?
Yeah, well, this one was, I think, was just called Game Trader. So real creative. All right, so here's another good question. What would you say is the hardest turbo game you've ever played? Junkie?
Are we going back to me?
Yep.
Well, I guess we briefly discussed this yesterday already, so I might as well use it. Obviously, if you're going to talk about the hardest game on a system, it's usually going to be a shmup. It's going
Yeah.
to be a shooter, one way or another,
I think
unless
I
it's
know
just
where you're
totally toy.
going. Sorry, Junkie. I think I know where you're going with this one, and if it is what I think it is, I think I need to think of another one on the quick fast. So
Oh,
go ahead. Go ahead.
might as well. It's kind of like the game I featured. I had it planned. I mean, there's plenty of hard games, but I said Ray's Amber 2 was always anytime anybody
Oh,
asks me like anytime anybody asks me what's the hardest game on the system, what's the hardest shooter of the generation, probably it's always going to be Ray's Amber 2.
I'm such an
Um,
idiot. You were talking about this one. This
yeah,
actually
it's
was
last
not
night.
the one I was thinking of.
Oh,
I have a really terrible short-term
yeah.
memory.
Well,
So
I'm glad. So now I didn't steal your choice, so I'm happy about that. You didn't
righto,
have to come
righto.
up with it. But the thing is, it's just it's at least it's a good game. I actually like Ray's Amber too. It's got a lot of flaws, and that's why a lot of people don't play it because it's just overly hard. It's they give you this terrible weapon that's unbelievably underpowered. It's difficult to kill enemies in it that are already overly tanky. So you always feel like this weak little mosquito, playing through the game, trying to kill all the enemies. And the special weapons are generally pretty sucky too. Um, the one thing about the game is that it'll let you continue endlessly. So you can just keep beating your head against the wall. It's like playing Ghosts and Goblins on NES until you eventually kind of not just memorize it, but get through it. It's like the first three levels of the game aren't that hard at all once you memorize them. But then stage 4 and 5, it just becomes ridiculous. And it's not just that they're hard. There's hard games that you can memorize, but they're also you can't consistently beat them. You can be really good at the game, but even when you are like, the boss of stage 4 and portions of stage 4 where those little orbs bounce around inside that wall of ice that you have to like slowly, you know, shoot away. You never know where they're going to go. You never know where you're going to get nailed. There's a lot of just RNG in the game. So you can't reliably, once you see it. I don't know anybody who has, or if they have, they probably have to play it a lot of times and eventually get lucky to do it.
Right.
When I beat it, I don't know how many times I continued, but I definitely continued a few.
It,
And to beat it, I mean, God knows how many times I had to rent it. um, but like I said, the music in the game is really, really good. The final stage in the game is super awesome. And graphically, it's probably my favorite of all the Ray Amber games, and it's quite good in general. So it's one of those games that you want to love it, but it just has so much RNG, and some of the bosses are just so unreliable to beat.
yeah.
Just so lucky that it's you want to play it because it's cool, but then you remember like how frustrating it can be. So like I mentioned in our chat yesterday, what I do now, because I don't have the game memorized anymore, is just I love the last level of that game. So I'll just like have a save state that's like starts the beginning of that level, and I'll just play the last level of that game because I like it so much. But I won't like put myself through the torture of getting to it anymore.
Yeah, it's astounding just how much easier Amber 3 was. Maybe almost too easy to compensate, but at least
Yeah.
it makes it a far more eminently playable game, and one that I actually really enjoyed a lot. Never touched 2, I admit, kind of afraid to be honest, so...
It's
um,
honestly not as bad as its reputation precedes it, unless you're like seriously trying to, like, once you see it or something, because it's just too frustrating to play over and over and, best the RNG involved in the game. Like, but if you're okay with just continuing until you learn it, and I said it's just whenever you're playing a shooter where you're grossly underpowered is always frustrating. So it's kind of it's one of those things.
the pea shooter paradigm, or whatever you could call it.
Yeah, I don't know of any. There's not many games that like besides maybe Deep Blue that like give you that level of a pea shooter and expect you to like be able to beat it.
I admit I've
Yep.
only played the three Ray Amber games briefly, each one of them. So one of these days I'm going to go back and at least take a serious crack at three.
but I did in I old video I did call like I used to do like a top five video where I would do like top five hardest shooters on this console, on that console, and obviously when I did PC Engine, Raze Amber 2 was one of them. And I have a segment at the end of that where, I play like large sections of that final level and just kind of show it and, what it's like and how cool it is. Like, and it's partly like why I kind of fell in love with the game is, there's parts of the game that are just so good, that are so well done and so fun to play that it's frustrating that how good of a game it could have been, with just, some more attention and some more polish and just not, more firepower and just not as difficult as it was, not as frustrating.
Yeah.
Like it had the potential to be like a top tier game, but it was not there.
All right, so how about you, Mike?
Well, I was thinking about this while Junkie was giving his answer, and I was originally going to go for a somewhat more obvious choice and say that Super Star Soldier probably qualifies. If that one's hopefully considered a very hard game by most shmup fans.
It's definitely the hardest of the soldier games, that's for damn sure.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
it's not an easy game to finish, but it's at least it's definitely a fair game. That's a game that you can learn to
Yeah,
once and see, and you can beat it reliably, unlike unlike Race Number 2.
that is true, yes. I did actually beat it once. Probably only once. I only have that in me, but I was proud to do it at some point. The level 4 boss can go infinitely screw himself, but other than that, and the final boss having like a ridiculous 5 forms or something, I do. The game certainly is beatable, so on that basis, I'm not sure if I could really call it the hardest anymore. But there is another shmup that I remember getting to the final leg of the final stage on, and then I just could not do it. It had beaten me down a lot before, but like it just went all out for the finale, and I just gave up and walked away. And to this day, I still have not beaten Download.
Oh, download the original one.
Yes, I don't think I have ever touched the PC Engine sequel, but I think I did at least get through Download using save states once, but I never beat it legit. That final stage 6-4 is just freaking ridiculous. Or in my opinion, I'm pretty sure there's someone who's willing to call me a tyro for wimping out in like the last leg there, but uh yeah, no, I still haven't beaten Download, so that's my answer. I haven't given this question as much thought as I probably could have and should have, but I do recall dying a lot in Download to even get as far as I did, and then that I couldn't even beat it was just kind of the cherry on top. So
At least it's still a really cool game.
oh yeah, no, I really like it, and its infamous profanities when you lose. That's probably its most defining feature. But aside from that, it's also a really cool one. It has a lot of excellent parallax scrolling and is very fast paced. And yeah, it's a really neat game. I'd like to try it more in earnest at some point. Maybe I can beat the final boss with enough focus, but. For now, that's going to be my answer, even though I'm probably sure there's an even better one I could give.
Yeah.
That one had really cool cutscenes too, like for
Oh
a
yeah,
cue card game. A lot of like cinematics and stuff.
That
Like
it did.
throughout, it was pretty creative.
oh yeah, definitely. Actually, wait, I'd like to change my answer to Time Ball.
Time.
Go right ahead.
Yeah, let's just go with Time Ball. I can only get like 3 or 4 stages in, and then puzzle
Alright.
games are not my forte. So,
Yeah.
but as for games that I am familiar with and have given an earnest try, I will go with Download on the record.
All right. So before I give my answer here, just want to say hi to Brandon Kilgore, who just showed up in the chat.
Yo.
And let's see here. First, let me just say that I am not very good at games. There are certain ones I'm great at, but for the most part, I've never been what you'd call a game master or whatever. I plan to have fun. If I end up dying and never finishing a game, it doesn't stop me from playing it again. That kind of thing, you know. Also, my sister is in the chat now. And
Hey, Sharon.
Hello.
let's see. So, when it comes to the turbo and the PC Engine and all that, yeah, there are plenty of hard games, but I'm going to take the easy out here and go with Deep Blue.
Fair.
Yeah, it's you have an underpowered, slow ship that you can't hold on to any weapons. If you get hit, then you get downgraded, and then they just throw everything but the kitchen sink at you, and you're dead. When Betty says, haha, you died in the videos, that's not an uncommon thing. Anyway, let's take a quick break here and go back through the chat and see what was going on. Let's see. A lot of talk about Rondo of Blood. And let's see, Fatal Vision here says, Splatterhouse 2 will always be monument to Namco's hatred for Nintendo. And yeah, let's just be glad none of us played Night Trap first. Such a terrible game. I'm sorry, I've never liked Night Trap. Let's see. Basically, we've pretty much covered everything. A lot of praise for China Warrior, surprisingly.
Some people like that game.
I like parts about it. It's just that said parts are not greater than the sum total. So,
Someone was asking if I played Fantasy Zone. Yeah, I have played Fantasy Zone. I remember that on the TG16. I can't say I was a huge Fantasy Zone fan, but I mean, I definitely remember playing it. It was fun enough.
Also, welcome Jolty Clayton to the stream. So, yeah, we're almost an hour in right now, so.
Yeah, we got to speed things up.
Yeah.
the last one I was on was at least 2.5 hours. So.
Oh, jeez.
Sorry.
I don't want to leave you guys hanging, but I only have like a half hour left, so.
Oh. Okay, in that case, yeah, we should move on then.
Let's power through the rest of this here. We're going to touch on the super graphics briefly. Now, I never personally had experience with one aside from one time, and that was only this past October. But, Junkie, what's your opinion of that system?
Well, there was no such thing, obviously, when I was growing up. So we didn't. I mean, I eventually saw it in magazines, but it was, oh my god, that thing looks awesome. I'd love to play, Ghouls and Ghosts kind of thing, but it was inaccessible. At least until I was much older, and I either emulated it or now I actually have a super graphics. I mean, I think everyone knows the system was a failure, but it had a lot of potential because obviously the games that were released for it, at least a lot of them were quite good. I think Ghouls and Ghosts is a fantastic port. 1941 is great. Aldines is a great game. It's just a matter of not having any software support. So, what are you going to do with it?
That's true. How about you, Mike?
I have almost little to no experience with the super graphics. I just know that its port of Ghouls and Ghosts looked really cool, so it's I do think it's a shame that it barely got any focus or attention. Like it's like, wow, you thought the 3DX was a failure. That is just record time just really conked out, but I don't really have a lot of personal experience with the super graphics, just that I lament that it was a failed extension to the extent it was.
I mean, it was a perfect example of what Hudson did, which is, if they had a cool idea, let's make it. Let's do it. They released so many different add-ons and devices and hardware for the PC Engine that it's like, let's see if it sticks. Super graphics was one of those things where it just wasn't necessary because once you had a Super CD card and you had an arcade card and these kind of things, you could do everything with a base system and a CD and the extra RAM that you didn't really need a super graphics. I know they had all kinds of big ideas for it. It has all these, ancillary ports, and they were going to make these huge controllers for it, all this crazy stuff. But it was just kind of like delusions of grandeur. They had these big ideas and they wanted to do cool stuff with it. So they just threw it at the wall, but it was one of those things that never went anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Sounds about right.
I've mainly played it via emulation. Back in the day, I think the first one I ever got to play was Dai Nakamura. And I did end up winning an SHDS3 in a contest that was held a while back. Thank you, Junkie.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And luckily, that one actually lets you play Super Graphics. So I have spent some time with it since, at least the games. All Dyne's good stuff. Dai Nakamura, also good. 1941 is fantastic. Even Granzort's not bad. Could be better, but it's not bad. And then there's Battle Ace, and I barely touched that one. And there you have it. All 5 games for the Super Graphics. Which kind of brings...
Now, the Super Graphics did enhance certain games, but not enough to make it worth the time. Like, if you happen to have, Darius Alpha. I mean, how many people had Darius Alpha? Where it would play the same game, but just a little more, it's flicker free.
Oh, well, at least that was kind of a nice feature to have. But there was one other game that was supposed to come out for the Super Graphics, which leads us into the next thing we were going to discuss. The arcade card games. And that game was Strider. And man, did that just fizzle out.
Yeah, that was the most disappointing arcade card game. One of them.
Yeah. You have anything particular you want to say about that one, Junkie?
Not about Strider in general, just because, and it's basically not really an arcade card game. It was a Super CD game that wasn't the best port in the world. It was just okay. That just barely took advantage of any of the arcade card features. I loved the arcade card, by the way. Once I got one and started playing the good games for it, I had friends over all the time because we just could not stop playing all the SNK ports, and more than anything because of how it was kind of mind blowing to see that kind of a game on a 16-bit system. It pretty much blew away the ports on the Genesis on the Super Nintendo because of how much insane amount of RAM it had. And again, I was just lucky to be able to rent them from the import shops, but I don't know how many hours we spent playing Fatal Fury and World Heroes on my PC Engine, or on my Turbo actually, with the adapter and running an arcade card.
How about you, Mike?
A subject I really should have done more research on, I'll admit. I will be honest, when it comes to actually discussing the hardware of a video game console, that's not usually my field of interest, so I don't really have a lot to say on the technical details of something. But was Street Fighter 2 an arcade card game?
No, Street Fighter 2 is actually a regular Hue card game, believe it or not. It was huge. It was huge. I mean, it had I don't remember if it was 20 something megabits or what it was. I mean, it was this fat Hue card. But yeah, crazy impressive.
Yeah, well then, this one's kind of a wash, but because we don't want to hold Junkie too long, I'm okay with skipping my turn.
Honestly, I mean, I kind of have an unfair advantage. I mean, I didn't really have to research it. I owned it. I grew up with it. It came out when I was, around that time, and I used to rent it. So I can talk about it with you would probably be able to talk about a console that, you bought day one and, played and had the hardware for.
Brandon asked, wasn't it called Fighting Street? No, Brandon. Fighting Street was actually the Turbo CD port of Street Fighter 1, the infamous game that existed before Street Fighter 2 did.
That game was rough.
You wonder, hey, why was this called Street Fighter 2 after all? I've never heard of Street Fighter 1. There is a Street Fighter 1, right? How is it? And then you play it, and then you realize why the series basically started with 2. Yeah. 1 sucks. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. And the PC Engine CD version, the only thing it improved was the soundtrack, which originally was a bunch of really ear-scraping bleeps and bloops.
Pretty much.
The final boss stage music against Sagat, I guess, was supposed to sound like traditional Thai instruments from Thailand, but oh no, my ears bleed every time I play that stage. So
Yeah.
like he's hard enough, and then there's this extra psychological layer of audio torture on top of that makes it even worse somehow. So, but that's kind of getting off the track. So,
Yeah,
Rob, if you wanted to
just
talk
to
about
say
the
what
thing.
little I can say about the arcade card games. The only ones I've really played have been Sapphire and Strider.
Oh wait, I have played Sapphire.
That's
Oh,
a,
it was really fucking hard.
it's a really impressive looking game, that's for sure.
It is, yes. No kidding.
Now, Strider, on the other hand, mine and Mike's friend Sam used to run the Light Sword Cypher mainframe website. In fact, if any of you were here for the history of Strider roundtable we did, he joined us on that. It originally started life as a Super Graphics game, then the development was shifted to the Super CD, and then eventually to the arcade card. And they did not do much work on that at all. They basically just kind of got it out there. And they included a new stage, but it's just so bland and boring.
Yeah, I mean, compared to all the crazy bosses in the game, Communist Centipede, like Giant Gravity Core, Robo T-Rex and all, the boss of that stage is a tank. Just a straight up, unironic, dull-ass tank.
Charm.
That was the best that they could do on short notice, so.
Hey, just remember this, Mike. Charm, seduce, tank.
Yes, indeed.
There's a long story behind that one.
Actually, I don't know what you're referring to off the top of my head, but
It was something Rodrigo translated from a Brazilian game magazine, where
oh, gotcha.
it was for Strider Return. Someone basically, the reviewer basically said, "Here you must use all of his charm to seduce the tank." It's like, what?
For as kooky and bad as that game was, that honestly wouldn't surprise me if he actually did have to do it. So
Yeah. All right. So
For anyone that doesn't know, or like a little bit of trivia on Sapphire, that game was developed by the two main programmers that did Thunder Force 3, along with other games for Technosoft. So
I did not know that. Huh.
yeah, well, once they switched over, yeah, they did that. Well, they did Gate of Thunder and they did Sapphire for Hudson Soft.
well, yeah, the
and
Red
then they did Hagane
Corporation?
for the Super Famicom.
Yeah, the Red Corporation were they known as? Or...
Yeah, they were called Red Corp. They call themselves a bunch of different stuff, but for the most part, like those were the two games, and it was they were the original like developers of Thunder Force 2 on the Sharp, and then Thunder Force 3 on the Mega Drive before they did stuff for NEC.
Now, Expert brought up a question here. Was Mad Stalker one of the games that required the arcade card? I didn't believe it was.
That's actually a good point. Mad Stalker, I don't know if it was an arcade card game, but it was one of the games that could take advantage of the arcade card. I can't recall if it was a full arcade card or not. It might have been. I remember renting it and playing it.
See, I never played that one. But we haven't really touched on the CD unit or the games at all to speak of, aside from a couple of heavy hitters. But did either you guys have any particular favorite Super CD games, or just CD-ROM games or whatnot, besides what we already talked about? Junkie?
Besides Rondo, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah, the CD games, I mean, I probably enjoyed the CD games even more than the U-Card games. Like, I used to rent the hell out of them. And, I mean, Lords of Thunder was the big one that everybody and their mother played and loved. And, obviously that had an effect on everyone. I loved it. And, Nexer was always another one of my favorites. I really liked that game. But with CD games, yeah, it's hard because there's just so many. I think with CD too, Super CD, whatever, all the cutscenes and the dialogue and the music was just so next level when it just came out. Like, even if you go all the way back to just the original E's, like everybody was just over my place when I got that CD, like in awe of like that intro. So it just all kind of went from there. And I mean, really, the PC Engine owned that generation for CD. I mean, the Sega CD was cool, but it came out way at the end, like way too late, when it was already, toward the end of the generation. So, it's only because the TurboGrafx wasn't really popular in the US that it didn't the CD format wasn't known to a lot of people, but
Yeah.
just the immense amount of CD games and how good they were and like how prevalent they were. I mean, there was more CD games on the PC Engine than there were HuCard games, like literally.
Hmm.
So yeah, it's endless. Like I think the total library is like 600 something, and I don't know if it was like over 300 or over 400 of them were CD games. A lot of great RPGs and all that stuff.
How about you, Mike?
Indeed. Well, X in the chat has mentioned Gate of Thunder, which is an excellent shmup and was relatively widely available back then. And knowing now what I know, what Junkie just said about the connection between Technosoft and Red, that makes a lot of sense why the weapon system is very Thunder Forcey in that game. Yeah, I did actually own that. I actually owned this like CD that had like Bonk's Adventure, Bonk's Revenge, and Gate of Thunder all on it, and it also had Bomberman 90 hidden on it, as I recall. I forget what
that was the
that
pack-in
CD was.
game for the Duo.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That was really forward thinking to have 4 games in one CD. Like what other company would do that?
Yeah.
But I don't remember too much of what other CD games I owned / played. I didn't have very many. But I will say that more recently, much more recently, like just like a year or two ago, I finally got around to playing, I forget the full title, Seirei Denshi Spriggan, wasn't it? Well,
Oh yeah.
Spriggan, whatever the case.
Yeah.
Spriggan.
That's compile. Yeah.
And wow, how have I not played this game before? This might be the best compile shmup ever made. Really close alongside Musha, at least. I don't know if it's better than Musha or not, but it's really freaking high up there. It's just really a quality shoot 'em up, and not too extremely challenging either. My first try I played it, the only point I had to continue was on the final boss, so no, it was just really fun and just really well constructed. An absolute must play for any shoot 'em up fans who haven't played before. Is it a hot take to admit I liked it more than Sapphire?
Oh yeah, I think so. I think Sapphire is a very impressive game technically, but it was good, but not great. Like overall gameplay wise, I just had a
Spriggan
killer
is,
soundtrack.
yeah, Spriggan is great though, in my
Yes.
humble opinion.
Yeah, Spriggan is really good. I mean, I don't know if I like it more than Musha. I like kind of like Musha's a little bit more fast paced, but
Yeah,
there's things about Spriggan I do like more. I don't like the soundtrack as much as Musha, and
oh, well,
but
that's a good point actually.
but
Musha's soundtrack is
but
immaculate.
just in general, like it's so colorful though. It's like beautiful looking game. Like they really took advantage. And what's crazy is like it's not even a super CD game. Like I can imagine, like it's a regular CD game. So they were very limited on RAM, making that game. It's probably by far probably the most impressive CD non-super CD game on the system.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, Compile really did a lot great with it, and I also did want to mention Nexer quickly on the side as far as other shmups go. That one's really damn good, but
Yeah.
I thought I was going to mention something else, but it slipped my mind. So Rob, you go ahead.
Well, I'm just gonna list my favorite CD games. At least my like top 5 or so, or not counting the ones we've already listed. But I will say Spriggan and Nexer are definitely up there. Gate of Thunder, definitely. Lords of Thunder is great stuff. I didn't quite get into that as much as Gate of Thunder. And there is one series I've always had a soft spot for, and I still own all 4 discs for the PC Engine. That would be the Valis games.
Oh yeah, they did have good music, that's for sure, and really cool cutscenes.
Yes. Hard to say which one's my favorite out of those, though. I still need to really sit down and play Valis 4. But yeah, that's just good stuff. Plus, my kids loved it too, so they wanted to be the characters in the game. Even have little plushies made for them.
Yeah, I it's been ages since I played any Valis, but I still mean to get around to the PC Engine versions of all the games, since I'm mostly only familiar with it on the Genesis. And to be honest, the only Genesis Valis really worthwhile playing is Valis 3, in my opinion. The first one's not bad, it's just, I don't know, it just seems to be lacking something. But the Genesis didn't get 2, it got Sid of Valis, which is kind of shit. I'm not going to mince words.
If it controlled better, it would actually be a better game. It's way too slippery.
Yeah, I completely agreed on that one. But I would like to play the actual version of Valis 2 at some point on the PCE. Although it's kind of strange because like Valis 2 was technically older than the port of Valis 1 that they had on there, because that wasn't the original system Valis 1's for. And then when Valis 1 came out, it was basically a remake that made everything all fresher and jazzed up and whatnot. So
yeah.
Sorry, Junkie, go ahead.
Oh no, so I think the gameplay definitely improved as they went forward. So like if you go back and play 2, like it has some really cool music, like but it's definitely more archaic, like gameplay wise, compared to like the improvements they made with the later games.
Yeah.
So like if you like the series, it's worth playing, but like don't expect it to be an improvement over like the later games.
Yeah, and also, Rob, I thought you were going to mention Ys at some point.
I was saving that. Yes.
Oops. Okay. I spoiled the.
So
okay.
let me go into that. I am not a fan of RPGs or action RPGs as a rule, but Ys Book 1 and 2 is my favorite action RPG of all time. I played that start to finish. I even got to meet, of course, now I can't think of his name.
Alan Oppenheimer.
Thank you, Alan Oppenheimer. I met him at a con a few years back. And interesting story about that. After we got the stuff out of the way, like he was, Falcor and the Neverending Story and whatnot. And I was like, oh, and you were also Darm in Ys Book 1 and 2. And he's like, Ys Book 1 and 2? So it's a video game for the TurboGrafx-16. Came out back in the early 90s. You did a couple voices for that. Darm was the main villain. And he's like, really? I was like, yeah. And he's like, I'm going to have to look that up. So his assistant was taking notes. And he's like, and I'm like, well, you were great in that. And he's like, well, thank you. And thank you for remembering that. And I've noticed whenever I see him listed as going to a con, Ys Book 1 and 2 has been mentioned ever since in his bio.
That's so cool.
Yeah. So apparently he did look it up. But he was also the narrator, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
Wow.
But yeah.
I think everybody who like grew up around that time and experienced that game like at the time, like was impressed by it and like has some kind of nostalgia for it if they actually were able to play it. It was just so damn impressive.
Such an amazing game.
Yeah, Ys Book 1 and 2 was a very early game that actually had some legitimate quality in its voice acting. Trying to look up who else was on it.
Michael Bell, I think.
Wow, Michael Bell, Jim Cummings, young
Yes.
Debbie Derryberry, apparently. Holy shoot. Wait, Thomas Hayden Church, is this thing accurate? What the
Yes, it is.
What the fuck?
I forget who he played, but yes, he's definitely in that.
Wow. That is astounding, to say the least.
I mean, literally nobody had heard music in a game like that in their life before when that game came out. So it wasn't just like, oh, it's a CD game that has CD music. It just had like amazing CD music. So it just blew everyone away.
It's a good thing that... Sorry, Rob.
I made it a point to have the soundtrack where I can listen to it anytime. Got the MP3s. So...
Yeah, I mean, even when I sold my, like, eventually, like, I didn't even sell it. It broke. Like, my old CD, stopped working and, moved on to future generations. Like, there's only, like, 3 or 4 games that I just kept, even though I couldn't play them anymore because I just so I could listen to them and spin them in the CD player was, like, Ys, Rondo of Blood, Lords of Thunder. Like, I still have my original games from back in the day. I would not sell them just so I could listen to them.
You got to love the fact that it Red Book Audio for that.
Yeah.
I was actually going to say it's a good thing the Darm Tower music was as catchy as it was, because you better believe that one's burned in my mind, because that's basically like at least half of Ys 1, maybe even more than half. Pretty impressive though, a very, very unique take.
I mean, the music in Ys 3 was amazing too. It's just too bad that I just didn't like the gameplay as much. They kind of went to the whole side-scrolling thing, so it didn't do it for me.
Yeah,
but the music was like freaking like wow.
Very, very much. I actually preferred the. Oh, hey, Weasel.
Yeah,
Welcome.
Weasel, how's it
Uh,
going?
I actually preferred the Genesis version of East 3 because it had much smoother scrolling than the PC Engine version, which didn't handle background scrolling as well, and it was all choppy and whatnot. Same issue for Ninja Ryukenden on there. But yeah, the Genesis version still had really good music. For some reason, they really botched that when it came to the SNES versions.
Well, much later they released they redid Ease 3
Yeah.
in a top down format, Oath and Fulgana, and they released it for PC. And it's like I
Yes.
played that and I was like, man, this is how it should have been. This is like
Yes.
awesome. And I had such a good time with it.
I think Oath is still kind of considered the gold standard for Ys in general. Like, I think some people still think it's the best of the series.
And the PC version especially, because like I know they released it for like handhelds, but like it's just you lose a little bit of that sound quality and having to listen to it
Yeah.
like on either little speaker or maybe through the headphones, it sounds good.
Yeah,
But like I
absolutely.
played it on PC and it was great.
Absolutely.
All right, since we're running out of time, we're going to go ahead and cover the last couple of questions here. So, and of course, the sad conclusion of the Turbo's life in America. As you know, it was for the first couple of years it was the Genesis versus the Turbo, and then the Super NES was released, and the Turbo was basically immediately stomped out. I remember seeing it on clearance in 1992, all over the place. So, given that, how did you feel when you found out that the Turbo was the loser for its time, quote unquote? How'd you feel about that? I mean, or
Um,
did you grow up as a fan of the system and just were sad that it just died so quickly?
yeah, well, I guess in my case, it came upon me differently. You know, I didn't feel like a loser. Um, Probably because I had access to all of the imports. You know, so I had access to all these
Hmm.
games. So pretty much all the way till the end of the generation before we started seeing like Saturn and PS1, you know, I was still playing it because I was, you know, getting the games. I was playing the arcade card games, like you know, end of life kind of stuff. Um, you know, and one of my friends is a huge Sega fan. He grew up with an SMS. You know, we used to always talk smack and,
Hmm.
you know, back and forth to each other. You know, and one up each other with the games. Um, but I was always glad that I had the system because nobody else did. So if I didn't own it and have all those imports, like I would have missed out like on all those games and growing up with them and playing them. And, you know, I got to play Genesis, you know, because all my friends had it. I got to play all SNES games because I had friends that had it, but nobody else had this. And even if someone did, there's no way they would have had like, you know, the import store and like the import cards and being able to play all that stuff. So it was almost kind of like the little secret, right? Like, you know, I didn't see it as the loser. It's like the system that nobody else had. It's like the secret that nobody knows, and it's this awesome system with these awesome games that nobody else can play. So I was almost like a sense of pride, if anything, like being the only person that had that, and having my friends come over and being able to play those like arcade card SNK games and Sapphire and you know Rondo and all this stuff. So you know that's kind of how it was for me, and like there was almost no sadness to it. You know, the only thing I'm sad about is that you know being a dumb kid at the time, you know, when the next generation comes along, you know, we're always quick to dump it and move on to something else, you know. So I
Yeah.
wish I had kept more of my older games and not sold them. But back then, you didn't have the money. So it's like, you know, the PS1 comes along and all these games are coming out. It's like, man, I can't afford this. How am I going to get it? How am I going to play it? You know, eventually, you know, I went to Game Dude over in the Valley, and there's literally that store is still there from 30 years ago. It's insane.
Oh, nice.
Um, Not the same store, unfortunately, like in spirit, but um, you know, so I wish I'd kept that. But other than that, like I just have nothing but great memories with it, and I got to play all the best games all the way up until the end and have people over and enjoy it. So like I never really thought of it that way. It's only thought of it that way now, and I'm sure NEC thought of it that way because they lost their ass on it. But
Yeah.
um, I mean, you know, having access to all of those games, like all the way till the end, you know, I couldn't have asked for anything more.
How about you, Mike?
Well, I was genuinely irritated that I didn't learn that the turbo graphics was a thing at all until like, I until when I was around like 10 to 13, around the time when I was becoming a teenager, and not to make everyone else feel old, but that around that time I was taking more of an interest in retro gaming, and like when I learned more about the history of the system behind the Magic Engine, I was like, oh wow, cool. Why have I never heard of this? And I don't know if I just had a really bad memory, which I still do, so that's very likely. Or if, like, there just wasn't nearly enough coverage on the thing back in the day, when you know, when I was reading whatever gaming magazines were out back then. But yeah, it was, in hindsight, for me, it was frustrating to know that such a great and amazing system that had a lot to offer just kind of got buried by history back then. And, being, as the unfortunate phrase, history is written by the winners go, like, and I know this is something that gets Rob's goat in particular. You'd think that, like, the SNES was the only fucking system of the early 90s,
Yeah,
depending on who's telling the story.
I
So,
call bullshit on that.
yeah.
And the important
I,
thing to remember too is that it was kind of buried by American history, or not American, but like Western.
yes.
If you speak
Yeah.
English, because it
Yes.
didn't do well here.
Exactly.
Mhm.
But people who know it in Japan, I mean, it's still well known and huge because it was the number 2 selling system out there. So it's kind of
Oh
like
yeah.
it's very well known, but only in the right circles, only in the right countries where it did well. Whereas, here it's a footnote.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's exactly it. But I am, like, say what you will about the internet at large, and there is a lot you can say, and not a lot of nice things you can say. But I do have to give credit where it's due. I am glad that there have been many websites that I came to learn about that have documented the Turbo/PC Engine's history and all the games that are good for and worthwhile looking into, and that I just feel so enlightened now to learn about this awesome system teetering between dimensions, between the third and fourth generation, that I think lives on relatively favorably today. And, like, when I learned more about it, I was like, hey, what about all these other consoles I didn't know about? Atari Jaguar. Let me see. Okay, fine.
At least that one wasn't all that worth owning.
Yeah. You better have missed
But it was better than the PCFX. Oh my God, let's not get into that one.
Yeah.
Oof.
Well, I'll just say, speaking for myself, and from my perspective at the time, yeah, I was sad to see it go. And it was like, I just felt like there was more that could have been done. And not really knowing about the PC Engine at the time, because I was literally just getting into imports. It was just like, well, it was fun while it lasted. Then a couple years after it was dead and gone, I actually took my original Turbo CD and all the games I had and went and traded it in at a game trader.
Oh.
And then I found out about Dracula X and successfully negotiated a trade with my younger brother for the Turbo Duo that he had.
Oh.
Just so I could get it. And then I started getting some games where that's when I got Gradius 2 and whatnot. Because it was the American Turbo Duo, so when I found you could play import CD games on it, I was like, okay, cool, I'm all set. And that stayed with me for the longest time up until the event I came to call the Great Crash in 2003 or 4, or whenever the heck that was. 4, I think. Maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it was 4.
And then after that happened, I actually got a PC Engine Duo R at one point. And when Memoirs came out, my first book, Memoirs of a Virtual Caveman, at least the second edition of it in 2014, I actually sold my Duo and my games to help promote it, which didn't really do much in the end. But then just, about a year and a half ago, I got a good deal on the Turbo, and it just all started up all over again, and this time I think it's going to stick. So in fact, I just had my core graphics region modded recently, which is nice. Plus, I've got that nifty SHDS3 and nice little stack of games I have. Of course, the first one I picked up for it was Splatterhouse. Gee, big surprise, huh? But I was definitely sad to see it go when it did go.
Mm-hmm.
So, let's see though. But there's a couple other things. How soon do you have to take off, Junkie?
I'm actually almost out of time. I gotta run.
Yeah.
So, but I hate to leave you guys hanging, but
Well,
one thing I did want to say, and I'm totally not saying this to like pander to my videos or anything like that, but the only reason I'm saying it is because I think most people that are listening to this probably already know and have probably already seen it. But for anyone that hasn't, and really is interested and wants to know more about the PC Engine and its history and like what made it cool, like it's about a year ago, I made 2 like history of PC Engine videos that really go into detail about the system and how it was unique and all the add-ons and devices and all that stuff. So like if anyone wanted like more history on the PC Engine, not to mention like that other one I did with every like single shooter on it. I've got like 2 or 3 videos on my channel that like really go like deep into like PC Engine stuff. If you like, for anyone that hasn't already seen them anyway, that's on this, podcast, most have. They're pretty good for that.
this is true, and I can definitely verify the quality of those videos. They get my thumbs up. Well, let's see. We're gonna go.
But if you want to ask one more question, I'll stick on. Do my.
I think we're just gonna go ahead and wrap things up right now. So
Yeah.
just first, everyone, my apologies for Kyle being a no-show. We have no idea what happened to him. Maybe something came up, but we'll find out eventually, I'm sure. Second, there will be another roundtable stream coming at some point in the near future, probably next month sometime. The subject right now seems to be cute retro games. So we're probably going to cover stuff like Parodius and whatnot, but you'll find out more about that when it happens.
Mm-hmm.
Also, keep an eye on my Twitter and stuff. I make announcements there about book releases that are coming. Speaking of which, the one I just unveiled the cover art for it. It's called Digital Archaeology. Both Junkie and Mike have contributed stories to that, along with a couple people in the chat, like Fatal Vision. So, got multiple book releases coming up, and of course, there is going to be more Dyer and Bette videos every Wednesday from now on, which my lovely wife will be joining me on. All right, you guys have anything else to say in closing?
I think I've said my piece already, and it was really fun. I never get tired of just hanging out and chatting about, Turbo and PC Engine for a while.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Mike?
Yeah, I'm up to talk about every era of gaming except for the first generation, which is unfortunately too old even for me. And well, I have thoughts about the 7th generation that I've made known off and on. I'm trying to be nicer, but yeah, I still have conflicting opinions, but hey, I'm up to talk games of any sort. I am a total nerd about them to a fault, and but it's always fun to discuss that which was lesser known of its era. And Hudson forever, fuck you, Konami.
And on that note, thank you everybody for joining us tonight, and hopefully you'll all be back for the next stream we do. So until then, have a fun. Take care.
Enjoy.